Well, before the show ends, we finally get shed some light on one of the show's most underutilized characters in what is by far one of the show's most tragic and best episodes yet.
Think I'll just let the mystery be. Think I'll just let the mystery be.
Hey guys, coming for The Leftovers, Season 3, Episode 6, Certified, and holy shit, this episode. I mean, I know, every single week I come on here and I'm like, oh, this episode hit me really hard, and truthfully, yeah, I mean, a lot of them really have. This is a very heavy show, and it goes into some really deep directions, and not just for the characters, but it just makes you think things that you just don't really think before, and it makes you look at life in a different way than I think that you really have, and I think that's something that the show has done extremely well, minus, amongst a bevy of other things, but that's definitely one of the things that I've always loved about the show. But holy shit, this episode. I mean, this has to be one of the most satisfying, but at the same time, one of the most tragic farewell episodes I've seen ever, honestly. I mean, this episode really was fantastic. I know I said a couple weeks ago that Good Day Melbourne is the best episode of the season. No, this definitely takes the cake. This episode was absolutely incredible. In every way, this was the best Laurie episode we've had, and that's not saying a lot because there really have not been many of them. Sure, Laurie had things to do in Season 1, but she wasn't exactly, I'd say, a character. In Season 1, she was more of, not a liability, that's not the word, but she was more of just sort of like the antagonistic figure. Like, she was kind of the catalyst for a lot of the drama going on and things like that, within the Garvey. She was a lot of the reason why things were going down. It really was until Season 2 where I think Laurie became a full-fledged character, and ever since then, I really have sympathized with her, and especially after this episode, I definitely do. But let's just get into this episode because there is so much to talk about, and something The Leftovers always does brilliantly, and something I've always loved about Damon Lindelof is the way that he does structure shows, because he said it before, he does not treat a TV season like you and I would. He doesn't just think of a TV season as that, a TV season. He thinks of each episode as its own little story, and that very well shows here, because we actually start 5 years ago, which was a really bold choice to go this far into the past. We haven't had this big of a flashback in quite a while, but we see Laurie, she's with a patient who tells her about having 4 failures trying to get pregnant. She gave up and they tried IVF and 40 grand for 3 eggs, and they joked about how they were going to end up with triplets and should make their names rhyme, but none of the names really stuck, and that was that. She gave up, no baby for her. 5 years went by, and they stopped bullshitting about an adoption. Then finally happened, she was pregnant, and his name was Sam, and it turns out that this is the mother who lost her baby in the first episode of the show, and this was an really brilliant choice, honestly, to connect these two, because her and Laurie are going through a very similar situation, we'll soon find out. And she tells Laurie about Sam departing, and she says she sat in the parking lot and waited all day in the hopes that he would come back in the exact same spot from where he disappeared from, despite him not knowing how to crawl, and if she's not there when he comes back, then what is going to happen? I mean, she has it in her mind that he is going to come back, and that he will, in fact, be lifted. Remember, this was 2 years after departure, so this was fairly new to a lot of people, and this was still when a lot of people were kind of theorizing what would really happen, and basically, she asked Laurie if he'd even remember her. She says she should stop. That's what her husband said, that she needs to give up, and she asked her if she's going to say something. And the entire time, Laurie is completely silent, and she tells Laurie the 2 GR members are sitting outside smoking cigarettes, and they probably think her patient are easy picking, because if she asked them to tell her what to do, they'd at least write it down for her, and she asked her if that's what she should do. She asked her to tell her what to fucking do, and Laurie simply says that she doesn't know. And this is understandable why Laurie does feel this way. I mean, obviously, sure, I mean, what Laurie is doing is really not the best approach, and that's something that's very interesting about this episode, is that throughout this entire episode, Laurie is not acting like a therapist. In fact, she's more of a patient than ever, and especially in this case, because as we know, Laurie is going through basically the exact same situation that Sam's mother is going through, which I think it's really interesting. They still have not given a name to this woman. I think that's really not important. It's more of who she is. The significance of her is that this is Sam's mother, and that she has had to go on without her child, and You know, I've said it before, one of the greatest losses anyone can endure is the loss of a child. There's no shaking that, especially when it is such a, tremendous loss, like what happened to Sam's mother, just such an unknown thing. Very similar to what happened with Lori. Lori, we know, also lost her child, literally was lifted from her embryo the second that the departure happened. And that's just crazy thing about it. And that's kind of what Lori's going through here. And we then see her, she goes into her medicine cabinet, and we quickly realize that she's trying to kill herself. She takes like a bunch of pills, and she writes down a suicide note to her workplace and tapes it to the door, but then takes it off, and she lies down on the couch, closes her eyes, abruptly gets up, and realizes that she's still alive. No matter what she does, she can't kill herself. And she goes into her bag, tries to take more, but ends up throwing it up, and she puts some cold water on her face. And yeah, we've seen scenes like this before, definitely, where characters have tried to die and it just hasn't really worked. But this was a completely different situation. I mean, this is a woman who literally was at the end of her rope, and to realize that basically she was suicidal here makes a lot of sense why she joined the GR. And she then strips off her clothes, takes off her wedding ring, and she puts on the white GR suit, and then meets with Patty, another member, and she asks them to tell her what to do. So immediately we see basically everything we need to see. We now know the real reason why Lori joined the GR. Sure, it was to get away from the Garveys and everything, but I think the real reason she did that is because that is the only thing that gave her a sense of direction. She didn't really know where to go after she lost this baby. I mean, where do you really go after that? And it took her 2 years to realize that the GR was a thing, which honestly I can understand. Again, this was 2 years after. You have to think that the GR has probably been, kind of like slowly running and really has not been a thing till now. And this is essentially how Lori joined the GR. I thought it was a perfect backstory for her character, and really does give us that sympathizing, really does give us that, not catharsis, that's not the word, but really does give us a reason to really sympathize with her. Obviously, I did in season 2, but now realizing what she was really going through and knowing that she was actually, just as fucked up as most of her patients, I thought was the perfect way to start things off. I really did love the way this was handled. I think it perfectly does get us into how dangerous and how hostile Lori still is today. So we then see the intro, which this time is appropriately 1-800-SUICIDE by Gravediggaz. I don't think I really need to explain why that is the intro. Not the most subtle of intros, I definitely will say, but it didn't really need to be. I think it worked for this episode. Even though I do think one intro would have actually been better, that's really my only thing with this episode. I'm not really going to complain about the intro of the show, because it's just not something to complain about. But back in the present, we see Lori. She's in a truck by herself, and she drives to the farm. And they perfectly did this scene where you don't know if she's still trying to kill herself. I mean, for a while, I didn't know if she was going to try to ram that truck into, like, a post or something. It genuinely looked like she was just going full speed. Like, I don't know if I was watching it wrong, but especially after what just transpired, I kind of feel like Lori is still suicidal. And she meets with Kevin Sr. He's holding a bag, and she asks what he has, and he says it's shoes, and he says he takes it to her husband, told her that they were there, and she asks which one. And this, again, was a very brilliant choice, because she really has not had a lot of scenes with Kevin Sr., and I've said it before, something The Leftovers is really relishing in doing this season is taking characters that really have not interacted before and getting them to do just that. And he says he heard she was with Matt and asks if he is coming. She says no, but he gave her something for him, and she opens her car door, pulls out a manuscript from the book, and she says Matt says he's sorry he didn't put him in his fucking book, and Kevin Sr. asks who torched it, and she says that it was Kevin, and she asks if he's here. He says he was, but right now he's off having himself a think, and she asks what it's about, and he says that they asked him to die again. And Grace then comes out with her dog, and Lori says whatever is happening here, she wants to be a part of it. No matter what it is, she doesn't really care what it really involves. She wants to be the one to save Kevin, and part of doing that is going along with this whole idea that Kevin is a biblical figure. At no point in this episode do I think Lori actually believes, what everyone else does, but I think that she's just kind of doing that because why, again, it goes to that whole thing she said to Kevin where you can't tell someone they're having a psychotic break in the midst of a psychotic break. And I think that's kind of why she is just kind of accepting and kind of just going along with the whole idea that, oh yeah, Kevin is Jesus. That's why I don't think she really tries to stop it here. So basically, Later that night, we see her, she takes out a camera and records a video of a lesbian couple in their kitchen. A dog then bites at her leg and she runs away, and she goes in the car where Nora is, and we realize that this was actually a while ago, and basically Nora asks her what happened, and Lori says that the dog bit her, but it's fine, it's just a little rabies, and Nora asks if it's them, and Lori says to tell her, and Matt is with them, and they watch the footage, and Nora recognized them being Dr. Becker and Dr. Eden, which we actually did get back into their story here. I thought we were done with the device, but that's clearly not the case. And it makes sense, too, because we know that Nora was genuinely interested in possibly using this device to her advantage, and she confirms that it's them. Lori says she told her it was the right house, and Matt says that they don't look like physicists to him, and Nora asks what they're supposed to look like. He says that they should be wearing lab coats or something, and he asks what happens now, and Lori says now they wait, and she doesn't exactly know what they're waiting for, but you can tell, again, she does want to help them. So the next day, Kevin Sr. takes them around the farm, and he basically gives them a tour of what ended up happening to him, which I like the way that they did do this, because obviously we did have the Kevin Sr. episode. This is now getting to see, like, a shorter version of that, and I thought, again, it really did help this episode be, like, its own standalone thing. Like I said, each episode's supposed to be like that, and I thought this worked very well here, and basically Lori asks if she downed the police officer, and Kevin Sr. says she was, and Grace says it was a horrible mistake and she will be taking responsibility for what she's done, and she says she's not sure if she understands, and Lori says that she does, even though you can kind of tell in the back of her mind Lori really doesn't understand at all. Again, she's kind of just accepting it, and she explains what Grace and Kevin Sr. plan to do, and Lori asks if they told all of this to Kevin, and he's actually considering it, and John says that he has one of Grace's horses headed out, and said he'd be back by sundown, and Lori asks if he thinks Evie is in that place too, because of course, as we know, Kevin did in fact visit the dead there, so why wouldn't Evie be there? And John asks why she wouldn't be. Lori says that everyone wants something, a brain, a heart, courage. Kevin's in the Emerald City, and he's the one that's going to give it to them. And may I just say, there was actually some really good humor in this episode, especially with Kevin Sr. calling her Dorothy. I mean, that was definitely really funny, and he asks her how she feels, and she says it's crazy, but these are crazy times. She very well acknowledges that, yeah, this is pretty crazy, but there's not really much she can do about it. I mean, the world is literally set to end tomorrow, so there's really not much she can do here, and Kevin Sr. asks if when Kevin comes back, she's not going to jam them up, and she promises that she won't, and Michael says she doesn't think he's coming back, and Lori says it's a lot to put on someone asking for all that help, and if it were her, she'd just keep riding and get as far away from this place as possible, but Kevin will come back since he always does, and they then hear a knock at the door. Lori goes to it, and turns out it's a policeman who asks if she's Grace, and she says she's not. He asks who she is then, and we realize that Grace is obviously about to get busted for what she did. Understandably, I mean, when you kill a police officer, there's really no coming back from that, but that really does come back to haunt Grace, and we'll get into that in a second, but we then go back to her time with the Jamesons, and she's watching a video about one of the women who went through the device, and Lori asks them if the two women in the house recorded this, and Nora says that one would assume. Lori asks if she's also assuming that they're going to lead them right to this device they told her about, and Nora says that she doesn't have to stay, and she can go help Kevin. She very well tells her, look, you don't really need to be here, Lori's just kind of there because because she wants to, and I really did love that connection between Nora and Lori. These are two women who have not exactly had the highest of, the highest of honor for each other, like, they really have not thought the best of each other, but you can tell they are going through very similar situations in their life, and both are kind of on the verge of suicide in different ways, and the way they really connected that in this episode, that was really beautifully done, and connected these two in a way that I really would never thought of before. So Lori says that Kevin is still at the airport, and last time she checked, all flights were grounded, but Michael and John will call her if they need her, and she's happy to keep helping her. And I love the way they slowly reveal that this was before, because at this point, yeah, I was confused. I mean, maybe I'm just stupid, but I didn't realize that this wasn't happening simultaneously. Like, I thought this was at night. Clearly, it obviously wasn't, and I like the way they revealed that here. So Nora says she already helped by finding her the address, and Lori asks if she's not going to let her see the suicide machine for herself, and Nora insists that it's not that, and Lori says it surely seems like an incredibly elegant way to kill yourself, and Nora says something that really is a big part of this episode, where she says if she was just going to kill herself, she'd just go scuba diving. And Lori then laughs, and Nora says there are a lot of ways to die while you're over. Your oxygen tank can break, you can get a bubble in your blood that gives you a stroke, and you get the sense that Nora's thought about this a lot, which, again, makes a lot of sense. As we know, one of the big parts of this show is that Nora has always wanted to feel something, and ever since her kids have gone, she hasn't really felt much of anything. She's just, I mean, she's gotten to a point where she's had people literally shoot her, target practice while she wears, a bulletproof vest just to feel something. And I think that's kind of why Nora has been theorizing about suicide. And it's understandable to, understand why. I mean, Nora had her entire life stripped away from her in just a matter of seconds. And obviously there kind of is no going back from that, and I think she, like I said, she's definitely kind of grappled with this idea of suicide, I think, for a while now, and I think that's why she knows a lot about this. So basically, she said she wanted to go just like that because, Jill and Tommy and John are saying at the funeral they protected, never knowing that she twisted the knot the wrong direction, and just like that she was gone, and clean, quiet, sternly, fully explained, and it can't get more elegant than that. So Matt's nose starts to bleed and asks for a napkin, and Nora says if she's going for inelegant, she could just do it like Matt, and knows that her cancer's back, and tell no one and get no treatment, and pray for a divine intervention. So at this point, we see Matt. Matt is definitely not the Matt Jameson that we've come to know at this point. I mean, at this point, he has accepted his fate, and he's kind of just waiting to die. Like, that's kind of the impression I got from this episode. He's not nearly as dedicated to his faith as he usually is. He's a lot more cold-hearted and very much reminded me of kind of like Professor X in Logan. Remember how Professor X, so sardonic, so just really aggravated a lot? That's very much Matt in this episode. And sure, he did have some nice moments, but at this point, it just seems like Matt is ready to die. And you can understand why. I mean, especially when you have this cancer and your wife is gone and you're kind of realizing that everything you've been pursuing might be a lie, possibly. I mean, I definitely want to die, because that's been the structure of my entire life, and everything Matt has done, he has supposedly done for Jesus, and I think now he's really starting to struggle with, who has he really done this for in the end. So I think that was something that, again, was very well portrayed here, and basically, Lori says that that's not fair, and he says it is, and he just heard that, and Lori says he doesn't want to kill himself, because she knows suicidal when she sees it, and Nora asks if that's one of her psychic powers, and Lori says she doesn't have those, and Nora says that John is supposed to be the psychic, and Lori says she knows how it works, and Nora says she doesn't, because she never actually got a reading, and tells her to do one for her, and says she came to her house, and John took her handprints, and she sat down across from him at the table, and she told him that she wanted to talk to her kids. What would she tell him to say to her in his little earpiece? And Lori has made it clear that they don't do departures, and Matt says to do their parents since they're dead, and Lori says she's starting the internet, look at social media, pictures and personal details about their death, and Matt explains how they died, and again, just that little mention I knew would play a bigger role at some point, and it did here. Again, it's one of those big things that don't ever think something on this show is just a small detail. Their small details always turn to something bigger, and this is a very good example of that. So Nora says, fuck her parents, she wants to talk to her kids, and Lori says she just told her that they don't do departures, and Nora says she did when her and her GR pals made her life-size replicas, made of her family, and then sat them down at her kitchen table, and says to let her have it, and Lori says she can't, and Nora asks why, and Lori says they tried it, and it doesn't work, and they had to stop after the third time John was attacked, and she tells her that death is easy because people just want finality and an end to their grief. But with departures, there is no end. And if they were to indicate otherwise by just saying that they communicate with these individuals, it made their loved ones often very angry because they didn't want closure. They wanted to believe that they were still alive. Much like Sam's mother wanted to believe that he was still out there, even if it was impossible and there was no way that they could actually still be out there. They just wanted that shred of hope in them. And obviously, Lori and John do not want to be the ones to take that away from them. We know the whole purpose of this is for them to get their catharsis and is for them to move on. It's not for them to dwell on this all their life. And sure, they've done it for good intentions, but it really has kind of bit them in the ass over time. You definitely do see that here. And it's also very important to note in this scene that Nora does want closure. I mean, she tells Lori that many times throughout this episode, and that's shown very well here, that she is there to get closure. While everyone else is kind of just accepting it, Nora is trying to move on. I mean, again, her entire life she's wanted to get her kids back, and I think she's realizing it's just not going to happen. And clearly, like I said, she does want to get that closure here. So we then go back to, I guess, the present, because this is definitely, we now know this is definitely the present now. We see Kevin Sr. and Grace are with the officer, and Michael's convinced he's going to find the body. I mean, there's no possible way he won't, and John says they have to hope he doesn't. Lori assures him it's going to be okay, and Michael sees the manuscript and asks Lori if Matt is okay, and Lori says he's fine and still with Nora, and John asks where she is, and Lori says she can't disclose that, and John is shocked, and obviously, he's shocked that she actually said that to him. And Lori says when they found her at the hotel, they said they're going to the airport to be with Kevin. And John says he wasn't there, so he called him and he actually answered his phone. And he said he was there and that they should come. And she asks why he didn't tell her. And John says because she doesn't believe in any of this. And Michael tells him to calm down. John says no and says she just shows up and won't even tell him how she knew that they were there. And he asks if she wants to disclose how she got the black eye. And she says she got it from Nora. And he asks if she hit her. And this was a perfect way to set things up. We know obviously something is going to happen with Nora, but I didn't really believe Lori. I'm like, there's no way it actually was Nora. I didn't think that's actually what happened here. And he says that he thought that she was supposed to be helping her. She says she did, and Michael says now she's helping them, and they look outside to see Kevin Sr. is actually knocking the officer out, and he casually asks them if they want to give them a hand, and I loved the way that the humor was contrasted with the serious moments here. Again, that's something the Leftovers does really well, is this idea of dark humor, and I thought that was really well done here. So, back in the car, Matt is taking out his pills, and we find out that they're actually steroids, and Nora asks if he has any painkillers because her uterus hurts, and before they went to her hotel, she went to a clinic, and she got her IUD taken out, and they said she may feel sore, and took her to take a couple ibuprofen, and Lori's surprised she's trying again, and thought that she would be done after she gave Lily back to her mother, and Nora insists that she is. I mean, she has to be done. But there is a big theory going around right now that Nora is in fact pregnant, and you know what? With everything that we've gotten with Nora, I wouldn't be surprised. I honestly would not be surprised if that turns out to be the case, especially with where this ends up going. I think definitely Nora could very well be pregnant, and she just doesn't know it yet, and basically, she lights a cigarette, asks if she's still smoking. Lori says she quit and hasn't had one since her and John got together, and Nora asks if she stopped for him, and Lori says she simply did it for herself, and I think she did that basically as a way to just get rid of the last shred of the GR, personified Lori. Obviously, she didn't want that part of her anymore. She's ashamed of it, and I think the reason that she did that is that was her way of moving on. That's always been a major theme in the show, is people trying to move on, and I think that was Lori's way of trying to move on and just trying to, just get away from all the events that happened with the GR and try to restart her life. And even though it wasn't necessarily possible, I like that she did try to find a way to do that. It makes sense why she would do that. And again, it's really great character progression for her. Someone who, in the beginning of Season 3, wouldn't even think of doing that, would resort to these things as a way to calm herself, in a way to get away from, in a way to, a way to calm herself, in a way to really use this as a coping mechanism, and now to realize that it hasn't helped her at all, again, was just really great character progression here. I really love the way it was done, and she does, in fact, have the lighter, though, and basically, Nora asks if she stopped for him. Nora says that's what makes it what's so cool. She lights one, and Lori asks for her lighter back, and of course, we know the significance of that lighter. The second she said them, like, it has to be Jill's lighter, and Nora says that she quit. Lori says she did, and Nora says she doesn't need it then. Lori says you just give it back, and Nora asks if it's like she did with Lily, and Lori asks for it back, and that just sets Lori off, obviously. I mean, that just sets her off. Matt agrees. Nora says that she said she doesn't need it. Lori screams for her to give it to her, which is how she actually hits Lori in the eye. It was completely accidental in her trying to get the lighter back, and I like that this was just an accidental thing. Like, she just accidentally hit Lori in the eye. She asks her if she's okay. Matt then tells them that they're leaving. Lori covers her eyes. They both hide from the doctors, and I thought this was just again, a really good scene. Two women who are really in the midst of moving on and are kind of starting to venture back into their old personas, and Lori, who has moved so far away from it, kind of being forced to reconnect with that again and go back to that persona. I thought was definitely, again, very well shown here. So Kevin Sr. then puts a screwdriver into the ignition of Lori's truck and asks if she stole it, and Lori says that that's coming from the man who just assaulted an officer of the law, and he's completely casual about it, as usual. Kevin Sr. assures her that he'll be fine, he had no choice since the chief's in a tarp under the goddamn church that he was heading for, and she asks where he's going to take him. He says it's far enough from civilization to give them time, and she asks if he's just gonna leave him, and he says the good news is that this thing with Kevin doesn't work out tomorrow, then who gives a shit, because they'll all be dead anyway, and Officer Koala will just drown in the flood along with the rest of them, but if it does work, he will be honored to spend his remaining days locked away from a world he just saved. And Grace then comes out, tells him it's getting late and he should be getting dinner ready, and he tells her he'll be back before it's on the table, and he warns Lori that a storm is coming, and he drives away. So she then goes to John, and again, this really does show the difference between her and Nora and Kevin, is that John and Lori actually do talk out their problems and actually are able to help them out. And she asks him what he's drinking. He says just coffee, asks if she wants some. She takes some, and he asks her if she remembers when the two of them went to coffee together for the first time and he was hurting, and she reached across the table and took his hand and looked at him, and he felt like he could tell her anything, but what he couldn't tell her is that he thought his daughter might still be alive. And he says Erica never doubted it, she just kind of took it in and moved on. One of the reasons why Erica's not in this show anymore, she's just kind of let the mystery be. She doesn't care what it is, she's just moved on with her life. She has successfully done that. The other characters here don't really know how to do that, but he just couldn't believe it, and he should have told her, and she says if he had, she wouldn't have talked him into helping people talk to their dead relatives, and she thought that she was helping him, but in reality, this was obviously making him more insistent on Evie being alive, and she should have taken the fact when he shredded the money, and he says he did that not because they wanted to help people. That's what we all kind of thought it was. It's actually because what they were doing wasn't real, and he didn't really feel like the money was real either. I mean, they're not really bringing anyone back from the dead. It was all a hoax, and she says that this is, and he's not so sure if that's really true, and I love it. He's doubtful about it, and she asks if he wants Kevin to ask Evie why she left her family, and he says no, and that he'd asked him to give her a message to let her know that she was loved, because that's something that Evie never really felt. She never really thought that she actually was loved in that house, and Lori tells him that that's beautiful. He gets up and tells her that one of Grace's kids was fostered out of a local tribe. He loved boats, and when his family found out that he died, some of his cousins came down here to leave a mark, and Grace told them to strip the church and took the word from the church to make a tombstone for her little boy as a memory, and the crazy old man came here, became convinced it was part of his flood story, and he still does believe him. So if he has to throw out his story, that means he has to as well, and he tells her to tell him that he's crazy and that they've gone too far, tell him and they can go home right now. And you can tell that John wants her to say this, like he wants to leave. He doesn't want to be involved with this and forget all this because he can still shred it, and she walks over to him and says he's gonna have to see it through since he's so close. There's no way they're gonna get out of it now. I mean, they went all the way to Melbourne. There's no way. And they embrace, and Matt then tells Nora that they're getting close and they'll see her, and Nora tells him to calm down. She knows what she's doing, and she asks Lori if her eye's okay. She says it is, and Nora says that she wasn't trying to hit her and asks if she heard about the guy on the French submarine who fired the nuke, and apparently he thought that there was some large egg in the middle of the Pacific, and he was convinced that this giant seven-headed sea monster was gonna hatch on the 14th, of course being the 15th for them, and eat them all, and he got the idea from Revelations, and Matt says it's ridiculous because it's not meant to be taken literally, it's just simply metaphorical, and Norris asks if it's only literal when it's not ridiculous, and Matt says that is right. Norris says that he would know, and he asks what would happen to submarine captain Kame sat on her couch and says he needs to destroy Godzilla. What would she even say to something like that? And Lori says she would say not to miss, and we then get the call that really does tie everything together. It's actually from Michael, and it turns out he actually did give her the address, and that's how she got there, which John obviously did not know about. And Lori then tells him about the ranch, and Nora says that that's good since tomorrow is such a big day. They should all be with family. And I love the way that just this seemingly connects everything together. It seems like such a random scene, but it's more than that. It really does show the bond that Michael and Lori do have, and that, Lori's in a place where even her own husband can't really trust her, and she's just kind of randomly showing up places, and I really did love the way that this connected things here. That's something Lindelof has always been a master at, and this was a perfect way to do that. So Grace is then singing a song about Jesus, and Lori is helping her make dinner, and she asks her if she has enough carrots, and Grace says it's plenty, and says that her husband used to do all the cooking, and she spent years trying to get the stew to taste exactly like his, and she says she even got it right once and then forgot what she did, and Lori says it smells delicious, and Grace asks if Kevin was a good husband, and Lori says that he was great, and he saved her, but he did divorce her, mainly because he had to, it was just kind of one of the things that the cult made her do, and she says that she's sorry about her children, and Grace says that his shoes were missing. They found their bodies, but it was clear that they had been walking for quite some time, but their shoes were just missing, and they weren't even at the house or with the kids, and she covered the ground in between 100 times and looked through every pair donated to charity inside 100 kilometers, and when Kevin talks to them, she wants him to ask them where they put their shoes, and to be completely honest with you guys, I don't think we're going to get the answer to this. I really don't. I think there are definitely some answers we're going to get in these next 2 episodes. I don't think this is going to be one. I think this is one of those things, just like, the whole not going to answer the departure question, where we're not going to know what happened here. Because, again, what's the point of the show? The whole theme of the show is what do you do when there's no answers? And I don't think there's really an answer for this. I think Grace wants an easy answer, but I don't really think there is. And basically, we see, she says she needs to go sit at the table and tells her to help with the stew, and Kevin Sr. then sits down, and we get this incredible scene where he tells her it's not much of a Last Supper. Grace says that he certainly cleaned his plate for not liking. He says the food is scrumptious, but it's not much without their Jesus, and he basically tries to represent each of them as different apostles in the Bible, and I really do love the way the show has really engrossed themselves in all this biblical material. I know Damon Lindelof, he always kind of turns to it, but it really does make sense in this show. And Grace says she's going to lie down for a bit, tells him to wake her when he comes back, and Kevin Sr. says the truth is along with their missing savior. They also appear to be short some apostles, specifically Matt, and he says that he will play the part of Peter, and John is already John, and he asks Michael what he wants to be, and Michael passes. He's not really involved in this, and Kevin Sr. says they all have to be somebody who is their Christ's last huzzah, and Lori asks if that would make her Mary Magdalene, and Kevin Sr. says that that would be Nora, who's also conspicuously absent. She's one apostle, only Thomas, and he says when he first started hearing voices back in Mapleton, everyone around him told him that he was fucking nuts except for her. She's the only one who really believed it. She was the one person and said that they were really there, and the next thing he knew, he was locked in a mental institution, and she says that she's not doubting Thomas, even though he thinks she is. Her representation, I think, makes a lot more sense. She thinks she's actually Judas, and she says doubting is easy because doubting costs nothing. But Judas was surrounded by people going on and on about how special Jesus really was, but he betrayed them anyway because he was sure and believed in something, and he acted on it. And Michael says he then killed himself after collecting his 30 pieces of silver, and if he was so sure, why did he kill himself? And Lori says she was not aware of that part of the story and has no idea, and asks if he left a note. And I thought that it was a very powerful scene. It really is telling for Lori. This is someone who throughout the entire show has always been the skeptic. She's always connected things to a more psychological manner, and now she's just kind of accepting it. Like, she's sort of just accepting that she's outnumbered here, and that's very much the case, that Lori is outnumbered. I think a lot of her stuff, she's not completely nuts about. I think she actually does have a point when it comes to it, but I think she's kind of realized that she is outnumbered, and I think that's what's just the more heartbreaking about the scene. And basically, she tells them that she's sorry, and Kevin Sr. then passes out randomly. John asks if he's alright. He sees Michael, who's also knocked out, and Lori says they're just sleeping, and she tells him she's sorry, and John then falls to the ground, and it turns out she gave them all of the dog's sleeping pills. And at this point, yes, it is very fucked up what Lori has done, but compared to some of the other things we've seen her done on the show, it honestly is probably the least fucked up thing she has done. I mean, we've seen her go to much more crazy measures, and that was something I really did love here, is that Lori did do it for the good of everyone. It is definitely the least fucked up thing she's done, but she's still just as fucked up as she was when we were introduced to her in this show. So Matt and Lori then walk to Nora, who watched Dr. Becker and Dr. Eden leave, and Lori says it looks real, and she asks Nora if this is the part where she calls the DSD and shuts this operation down, and Nora asks Matt if he remembers when they were kids after their parents died, when everyone in the church wouldn't take their eyes off them, they take them to the movies and bowling. And this scene, I mean, we already know so much about Nora and Matt's childhood, but this scene just made it all the more heartbreaking. I mean, if you could not, if Nora Durst does not have the most shitty life ever, I don't really know who does. I mean, after this scene, no contest. The Jamesons have had it terrible, basically for their entire life. I mean, just knowing what happened here is just so utterly depressing. And basically, it turns out what ended up happening basically is that we see, basically she tells her this story about how there was this beach ball, and basically there was this putt-putt, and this one time they brought them to a baseball game. She was too young to get the rules, so she watched these people at the end of the section hitting a beach ball, and the whole stadium was getting into it, and when the ball came over their seats, he stood up and whacked it, and it was the first time she's seen him happy in forever. But then the ball went into the aisle, and this usher then ran down and grabbed it, and he picked it up, and he squeezed the air out of it, and then the entire stadium started booing, and he didn't ruin it for all of them. They just wanted to hit the ball. And she asked why he wanted to do that job, or anyone for that matter. Why would he ruin that fun? The one time that Matt was happy, someone had to ruin it. And obviously, this really did hurt Nora in every way possible. I mean, this was something that she rarely got to see him happy. In fact, we've rarely seen Matt happy on this show. It's very sad, but that's the truth, that we rarely have seen her happy here. And I think that was something that was just really sad about the scene, knowing that not only has Nora lost her family, but even back when they were kids, they had such a shitty life. And the way that these two are connected here, basically, she says the ball went into the aisle, the usher ran down, and Lori says because if he doesn't hit the ball, we'll go onto the field and it would be fucking chaos. And Nora then cries, Lori hugs her, and Lori hugging her, I thought was kind of catharsis for both of them. They're both kind of getting over what happened. Nora tells her that she can take the van, she doesn't need it anymore, and she asks Matt if he wants to drive, or should she, and Matt says that he thinks he's going to stay here for a while since people should be with their families, and Nora's happy to hear that. Matt then hands Lori the manuscript, tells Kevin he's sorry he did, and Nora asks if she has to tell them she did this, and Lori says to give her $1. Nora says she only has hundreds, and Lori says to give her the cigarettes, and Nora takes them out. Lori says she's now officially her patient, and Nora asks if they can meet the same time next week, and at this point, I was shedding a few man tears. I'm not gonna lie. I was crying at this scene, because how can you not? After everything that Nora has been through, she finally has someone that she can confide in, and someone who can really help her, and I thought this just was really powerful here after everything that Lori has done for her, seeing that she actually does want to be in her life, and basically Lori agrees, and then she leaves to meet with her family, and this scene was beautifully structured where you see, Nora and Matt, they're now staying, they're now staying together because Matt has decided that he's going to stay there, and just Nora's reaction of, okay, like how happy she is that she actually does have someone with her, and Lori walking away, really to show how important this is. The Jamesons are a story, she's just not a part of their story, and I thought that was something that, again, was very well portrayed here, and it really does show who the center is really, who the story is really centered on. That's something that Damon Lindelof always gets right. So I thought that was definitely one of the most powerful scenes here, and when it really comes down to it, we didn't need any of this Nora stuff, but it really only further added to the narrative. It gave us a lot of catharsis involving Nora's hatred for what Lori has done in the past, and I think it really did give us that closure that we really want with the show, especially when it comes to Lori and Nora, two people who really have not thought much of each other, and them getting closer throughout the end of the show, I think really was the right direction to go. It was really the only two people that Lori had not yet interacted with, and I really did love how that changed here. And after a whole episode, we finally get to see Kevin. He actually does return home, and we get a very cathartic scene between him and Lori. Now, Lori and Kevin have really been through it all in the show. I mean, when it really comes down to it, Lori in the beginning of the show was in every way the main antagonist, like I said. She really was someone who just provided obstacle after obstacle for Kevin, put him into this hellhole in the first place, and now they really have moved past it. But we really haven't gone to see a scene of them really making amends and really talking about everything they've gone through, and this scene really did make up for that. Justin Theroux and Amy Brenneman acted the hell out of the scene, even though it really is the first genuine scene they have together, and I loved the way this was portrayed here. Basically, Kevin finally arrives back at Grace's house. He gets off her horse and asks if John called her, and she says that Michael did, and he says that they said she was with Nora, and she says she was. He asks her if she helped her find what she was looking for. She says she thinks so, and he asks where everyone is, and she casually says that they're inside sleeping and she drugged their food, and he's obviously a bit bewildered. I didn't think he was really gonna be, because after everything Kevin's been through, but she says she wanted them to talk one-on-one. She didn't think that they would let that happen, and he asks if she knows what they want him to do, and says she came here to talk him out of it, and she says she's here to say goodbye, and asks if he wants a cigarette, and he agrees, and she decides to smoke, and he notices it's actually the lighter that Jill gave her, which still says "Don't forget me" after all these years, and she says she threw it in a sewer grave and then went back for it and tells him not to tell her that, and he says there's nothing, and he says that's really nothing. I mean, obviously, what Lori did is just insurmountable damage to Jill. Like I said, I really don't think they'll ever fully make amends. I think Jill will always sort of have not this hatred, but just this untrustworthiness in Lori. I just don't really think those two will ever get to a point where they make amends. But he then talks about how he actually killed her hamster when they were down to that Mach-UN thing. He didn't feed it, and he went up there an hour before they got home, and it was completely dead. And he says it went to the neighbor's trash, and he threw it in there and told him it went away, and he says, "Rip Mr. Funny," and she asks if he remembers that psychosomatic conference thing she went to in Phoenix, and says she lasted 2 hours and then went to a spa that cost her $2,000 a night, and he laughs and says he hated their house but didn't say anything because it was her money that bought it, and she says that he should have said something, and he says she loved it and he wanted her to be happy. And I love the way they're just confessing all these really small things that we really had no idea about now that they're not married, and that they very well know this could be the last time they see each other and actually get to have a conversation. They really are just reveling in everything they've been through, and she finally tells him something that I never thought that Kevin would find out. I thought we would go through the show and he would never know this information. But because her and Kevin are in such a peaceful place where she can finally feel like she can tell him anything, she finally tells him that she was pregnant 16 weeks, 7 years ago tomorrow, and that she was lying in the doctor's office, staring at the ultrasound, looking right at it, and then it was gone. And he is obviously surprised as to why she didn't tell him. And she says that they raised two beautiful kids, and it's the last best thing they ever did. And she asks if he wanted another baby. He says no, and she agrees, and she says she didn't tell him because she didn't want to, and then didn't have to, and she didn't really feel like she was obligated after. And she asks if he's scared of them trapping him to seesaw and holding him under the water until he drowns, and he says the last time it happened, where he went, it was so real, and maybe he was dead, but he has never felt so alive. So no, he's not. He really did feel alive, like he accomplished something. Remember, he extinguished Patty, and she says that then she's not either. He says it could work, and he could come back, and she says she really hopes that he does, and he asks her if she'll stay. She says she can't, and she kisses him on the cheek, and just that one line of her saying that she can't and leaving, I mean, you can tell this really is the end, and she's about to leave. He tells her he has her lighter. She says he can keep it since she quit, and he thanks her. He asks her if Nora's gone. She says that they all are, and I think you can kind of interpret that line in different ways. I mean, sure, they all are as in, you know, the apocalypse is happening, we're all gonna die, so yeah, we all are kind of gone. I personally not interpret it that way. I interpret it as they're all gone, as in they are just not living. In, you know, yes, obviously physically they're living, but emotionally they're not living. They have these deep, dark, things about their past that haunt them, and they just can't seem to get away from it, and they just can't they keep latching onto it, and they can't help but just break away from it, and, they kind of all are because of that. And he says goodbye, realizing this may be the last time he ever sees her, and this scene could have easily been very overbloated, but because of how subtle we really did play things here, and because of how natural it really was, it really did work out perfectly. You know very well this could be the last time that Lori and Kevin do see each other, but they really did take the time to really fully establish this relationship, and when all is said and done, this could very well be the last thing they have here, and if it is, I am very pleased with the note they ended things on. But then we get to the ending, and holy shit, this ending. I mean, this has to be in my top 5 favorite Leftovers ending. This ending really has everything that I love about the show, because she goes onto a boat wearing her scuba suit, and immediately you know what she's going to do. She's not going there to scuba dive. That's definitely not why she's there. She's going to go to kill herself, because that's what Nora said she'd do. And the captain says as far as he can take her with the storm moving in hand, and she ties her hair back, puts on a wetsuit and other scuba gear, and she then gets a call from someone who I never really thought we'd see much from again, that being Jill. Jill has been significantly underused this season, but I think it's been intentional. Again, just like Erica, she's one of the only characters that's really let the mystery be and accepted, what's really been going on. She hasn't really tried to do anything. She's not really questioning it. She's just realized that, this is much bigger than anything she could ever imagine. And obviously, she's just not doing anything with that. But the question that Jill's there for is anything but extraordinary. In fact, it's a very ordinary question. She tells her she has a very important question to ask her. Tommy's with her, and Jill asks if she remembers that time when she was like 5, and she found this videotape at a garage sale, and she was obsessed with it, and Tommy says it doesn't exist. He's convinced there's no way, and it doesn't make sense, and Jill says it does, and she remembers that it had a mannequin that had this hat that made it come to life, and there was a goose on a rainbow, and a puppet that worked at the department store, and it was called Today's Special, which is an actual show, mind you. I didn't think it was. I thought the show, made it up, but no, I watched the intro after the episode. It's a really strange, out there kids show, but it was a real thing, and Jill then praised herself and Lori for remembering, and says that she knew she'd remember, and asks her if she remembers how many times she had to listen to that theme song, and Jill says she's really sorry that she put her through that, and Lori says it's just a phase and she forgives her. Jill tells her about how Tommy said that Kevin and Nora moved to Australia and asks her what's that about, and Lori says that she has no idea, and Jill asks what she's doing right now, and Lori obviously lies because she doesn't want Jill to get involved. I think she sees how at peace and calm Jill really is, not really worried about the world ending or anything like that. She just kind of has her life together, and I think knowing how put together she is and how not together, she personally is, I don't think she wants to get her daughter involved in this kind of thing. So she tells her she's just hanging out, and she asks if she's by herself on the anniversary, and Lori says yes, and it's nice, and Jill tells her to enjoy her solitude and says she loves her, and says to tell Tommy that she loves him. She hangs up the phone, and the instructor tells her it's now or never. She puts on her hood, and, without thinking, she quickly does go into the water, possibly to complete her multiple suicide attempts, finally fulfilling the act that she tried to commit so many years ago, and that is the way this episode ends. Really incredible stuff overall. Let's just get into this episode and where we're going to go for the last 2 episodes of this show. Holy shit, this show. I mean, guys, this show just makes me so emotional, and there's just so much that it gets out of me that other shows just don't, and that's why this episode was so damn good, because it really is diving into that deep part of your, dark part of your soul that you are afraid to let out, and that's what these characters are really going through. And when Lori says things like, we're all dead, that's kind of what she means, is that their souls are kind of gone because they've experienced all the emotional damage they possibly could. They're not the same people that they used to be because of these horrible tragedies that they've all faced, and if it's any indication, this episode was absolutely incredible. But let's just talk about that last scene, because there's a lot of speculation as to what actually happened there. Did Lori actually kill herself? Did Jill possibly inspire her to go on with her life? Personally, I think that Lori went in with the intention of killing herself, and I think it makes the most sense because now she's at a point in her life where, hey, we're all gonna die anyway. I've wanted to do it all my life. Now's the time to do it while I can just, die peacefully. And that's the thing Lori is. I think Lori's in a peaceful place. And I think the thing with Lori is that the only way for her to be peaceful is for her to just die, because that's what's really gonna make her feel like she's back in that peaceful place. It's something she did on her own, and she is very damaged, and she is suffering, and that's something I really did love seeing with Lori's character throughout this episode, just seeing how damaged she really was. I mean, obviously, I don't enjoy seeing someone damaged, but I really love that journey that Lori went on here. And if this truly is the end we've seen of Lori, they really pulled out all the stops they could to make this feel like a departure episode for her. And obviously, she didn't depart, I'm saying, but I mean, this really did feel like it could be the final exit for Lori. And I love that they got the whole cast in there. Like, they managed to get every single cast member in this episode, which I can't remember the last time we've had an episode where everyone was together since the premiere. That's the last time that really everyone was there. Even that episode, though, Kevin Sr. wasn't there. Everyone was in this episode, and it was so satisfying. I love the way we got everything we did here, and I think it was all beautifully presented. Moving forward, though, I don't really know where we're going now. I mean, obviously, we know Kevin is supposedly going to, commit suicide and go to the afterlife and then come back, but how do we know that this is actually going to work? How do we know that he actually is going to come back? And honestly, I think Kevin's willing to die. I really do at this point. I think he's okay if he does end up sacrificing himself for a better cause. Like, if he doesn't come back, I don't think he's necessarily going to be upset. He knows very well the stakes of this mission. He knows it might not go as well as it did last time, and maybe he will die. Because remember Matt's theory that Kevin can only, live, Kevin can't die while he's a miracle. Who's to say that's going to apply to Melbourne? That no one really has said that. And the only reason Kevin Sr. thinks that is because of past events that have happened with Kevin. But the whole dying thing, that didn't really start till he got to Miracle. So the big question is Matt's theory actually true? That's what next week's episode is really going to answer, is can Kevin die, when he's outside of Miracle? Is that actually possible to happen? And if Kevin does die next week, which I doubt's going to happen, he's our main character, I don't really know what's going to happen there, but I'm definitely interested in seeing how that's all going to go down. And like I said, the whole thing that Grace wants, as much as I think Kevin is going to do all he can, I think it's going to be one of those things the show's just not going to answer. And I don't know really where that's going to go, but I really doubt that Kevin's going to be able to answer that. I mean, it's a lot to ask out of someone, and I just don't really know if Kevin's going to be able to answer something like that. As far as Evie, I do think we're going to see Evie in this afterlife. I think it makes the most sense to do that. Meg as well. Liv Tyler's the only major character that has not really been a big part of the season, obviously because her character was killed off. But I think because of what they did in International Assassin, and in light of the cameo we got from Holy Wayne and from Gladys, I think it would only make sense to include Meg and Evie in this episode. I think it definitely that's where we're going to go here. I think we're going to get an International Assassin sort of episode, but I think it's going to be slightly different. It looks like the entire cast is there, except Lori, of course, because we don't really know what's going to happen there. Is John going to find out about Lori's death? I don't really know. Are they going to be okay with it? I don't really know. I don't know if they're going to be okay with it necessarily, but are they going to find out? I don't really know. We'll have to see really where that's going to go. And Jill and Tommy even. I love that they did get Jill and Tommy involved here, who are really the only characters that seem to be in a place of, solace, where they really are happy, and they've kind of let the mystery be. I think that's why we haven't gotten a Jill-centric episode. We haven't gotten a Tommy-centric episode, because there's no more story to tell with those characters. Tommy is happy where he is. Jill is happy where she is. They don't need to be anywhere else. They're perfectly fine, safely in Jarden, and they've really established, all of the damage that they've gone through has kind of just, gone away from them, because they haven't had these crazy encounters with the past. I think genuinely in the first episode, everyone was kind of in a good place, but because of the past that always does haunt them, it always does kind of come back to beat them in the ass. And much like Judas, who was kind of on the outs of everything and kind of denying everything that's going on, Lori was kind of forced to confront her inner demons, and I think that's kind of what everyone's going through this season, and I think that's something that we're really seeing brilliantly here. To be honest with you guys, we didn't really need the Nora and Matt stuff. We really didn't. I think we could have had this entire episode and not even seen Nora and Matt. But because this was her final episode, it just made things feel more complete. We never really had a scene with Nora and Matt. I mean, obviously, we had stuff with Matt in the GR, but that mostly involved Meg. It never really involved Lori. And yes, we had the whole thing with Matt and Lori last week, but I think it only made sense for her and Nora to bond because they are going through such a similar situation. They both lost children, and that's, again, one of the greatest losses anyone can endure, and it's one of the worst pains anyone can really go through. So I think that's something that, again, was just a brilliant choice to have them bond here. Just the scene with Kevin, even the scene with Sam's mom was just brilliantly done. Every scene in this episode was brilliant. There wasn't a single scene in this episode I would take for granted. There wasn't a single scene that I didn't love here. Guys, this has to be in the top 5 episodes of Leftovers, without a doubt. This is one of the best episodes the show has ever done. Amy Brenneman better fucking get nominated after this episode. Holy shit. I mean, I know that's obviously why they moved the show to April, and I really hope that does pay off because she was fucking incredible here, and I would be so upset if she does get nominated, especially after this episode. That better happen. This has been one of the most underrated actresses of the entire show, and she finally got her time to shine here, thank God. I mean, I was very happy that they have been able to use her as best as they can, especially because, like I said, of how small screen time she really has had on the show. Sure, she had a lot in season 1, but she didn't really talk then. Season 2, she was in like 2 episodes, and here they really have utilized her as best as they can. Literally the only complaint that I could have with this episode, guys, like I said, is it was the wrong intro. Like, personally, if I were to redo the intro, I think 1-800-SUICIDE is a very good intro for the show. But because of the big role that today's special played at the end of the episode, I honestly kind of do wish that was the intro. But with a show this good, and that's my complaint, that's when you know the show is really doing it right. When my only complaint really is just the fucking intro. Guys, in every way, this was one of the best episodes of Leftovers we had. And obviously, I'm giving The Leftovers Season 3, Episode 6 certified a 5 out of 5 or an A+. This show is just on a roll. It really is. They're churning out amazing episode after amazing episode. I don't really know where the show is going to go from here, but I'm completely fine with that. Again, the show did an amazing job of simultaneously closing out one arc while also opening a bunch of other ones. We might never see some of these characters again, but we might see them again, and there are just so many directions we can go here, and I can't wait to see the way everything does tie up, because at this point, I'm less interested in how the show's going to wrap up and more just excited to see more of what the show is going to give us, because unlike other shows where obviously it is crucial for the show to wrap up things, I'm definitely much more interested in the interworkings and just the intricacies of all these characters as a whole and where they really do end up when the show does come to an end. So, overall, guys, for me, The Leftovers, how much you guys thought this episode overall, left your thoughts, and I know this was, again, an extremely long review. I just can't help myself. This show, I have to gush. I'm sorry, guys, I have to. You guys know how much I love this show, and guys, there's only 3 episodes left, so I'm just taking all I can to just get out all of my emotions and everything I feel when watching these episodes and just do that. And after that, you guys don't have to worry about long reviews anymore. But either way, guys, let me know what you guys thought of this episode. Loved your thoughts, and just amazing, amazing stuff overall. Probably the best episode I've seen so far this year, to be honest with you guys. I loved everything about this episode. I don't know if we're going to get one that tops it, but being The Leftovers, I feel like that definitely is going to happen. But that's my review. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I will see you guys in my next video, which will be for American Gods, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.